You think that when you ignore the narcissist, they'll quickly forget about you and move on to the next supply? Think again. Here's the truth. Every day you stay silent, they are not at peace, no matter how composed they try to look. They're not fine, they haven't moved on, and they're definitely not happy, like those carefully curated social media posts suggest. Because when a narcissist feels ignored, their control game collapses. They lose their grip on your emotions. They no longer know what you're thinking, feeling, or doing. And that unpredictability, that's their worst nightmare. They start to panic. They watch. They study. They test the waters. They come back with fake concern, asking subtle questions like, "Where have you been?" Just to gauge, do they still own a piece of you? If you react, they resume the old game. But if you don't react, they begin to obsess. In today's video, we're exposing the daily behaviors narcissists repeat after you ignore them, subtle actions that may seem harmless, but are loaded with toxic manipulation. If you've ever been caught in this emotional tug of war, subscribe to the channel and watch until the end, because understanding what really happens behind their silence might be your most powerful tool to reclaim your emotional freedom. Here's one thing you must never forget. Narcissists cannot tolerate being ignored. To them, your attention isn't just desirable, it's the fuel that sustains their distorted ego. So when you go silent, when you stop responding, when you withdraw from the emotional game, what you're doing, whether intentionally or not, is cutting off the very source of power they rely on every day. And that's when everything begins to unravel. They won't show it outwardly. They won't beg or plead. No, narcissists usually start by appearing calm, detached, even indifferent. They want you to believe they don't care, that your absence means nothing. But inside, it's absolute chaos. Every single day they're watching you, quietly but persistently. They're checking your social media, tracking you through mutual friends, maybe even coincidentally showing up in places you frequent. They may not send a message, but rest assured, they are monitoring your every move, waiting for any sign that you still care, that you're still emotionally hooked. Why? Because to a narcissist, losing control feels like losing themselves. So when you respond with silence, not passive aggression, but real indifference, they don't know how to handle it. They're not used to this. They've grown accustomed to being the one who pulls the strings, to you being the one who reaches out first, the one who apologizes, the one who explains, the one who fights to fix things. And now that you've stopped doing that, they panic. They begin to test familiar tactics. A random message, haven't heard from you in a while. A vague comment on one of your posts. A mutual friend suddenly bringing up their name. None of it is by accident. These are baited hooks. They're trying to find out, will you bite? Are you still as emotionally pliable as you used to be? If you respond even once, they'll pounce. They'll feel their power returning. But if you stand firm, if you remain silent with intention and clarity, then you've done something most people never managed to do. You've broken their cycle of manipulation. And when that happens, the narcissist can no longer play. They become uneasy. They start questioning not just you, but themselves. Why doesn't she need me anymore? Has he really moved on? Did I just lose someone I thought I had full control over? That confusion begins to eat at them from the inside. And ironically, it's your calm, your detachment, your true peace that becomes the very thing they obsess over. You become the one they can't predict, can't manipulate, can't define. You become the exception in a world they thought they could control. And nothing disturbs a narcissist more than losing a perfect supply without ever getting a chance to reclaim it. And from the moment you maintained that silence, a quiet obsession began forming in the narcissist's mind. You didn't react. You didn't rage. You didn't explain. You didn't beg or display the pain they were used to seeing in you. That left them confused and disoriented. So what happens when a narcissist can no longer control the situation? They become obsessed with figuring you out. Their thoughts begin to spiral. What is she thinking? Why is he so calm? Has she really moved on from me? They can't stand the idea that you're doing well without them, so they start trying to rationalize, creating stories and rewriting the narrative just to soothe the fracture in their ego. They might even tell others that you're pretending to be happy or definitely still in love, all in a desperate attempt to maintain the illusion of control. But the truth is, you've stepped out of the toxic cycle, and that realization unnerves them more than anything else. So they come back, but this time they don't come charging in. They return calmer, more calculated, more subtle. They pretend to care, to check in, to show they've changed, that they've reflected. But it's all just to test one thing. Are you still emotionally available to them? This is the most dangerous stage, because now they will target the one thing they know best, your compassion. They might say they're tired, lonely, healing, and just want to talk to someone who once knew them well. They know you're empathetic, and they'll try to trigger your sense of responsibility or guilt. If you soften, even just a little, the cycle starts again. But if you're grounded and self-aware, you'll recognize this isn't an apology, it's a strategy. A narcissist doesn't accept being left behind without leaving scars. They can't bear the fact that you saw through them, understood them, and still chose to walk away. They need you to feel regret, shame, doubt, because only when you're emotionally unsettled can they regain the power they lost. And if you continue holding that calm detachment, they don't just lose you, they lose their grip on their own identity. They'll start comparing every new supply to you, and no one will match. They'll try to recreate the dynamic they had with you, but no one will respond the way you once did, because you weren't just a partner. You were the mirror that reflected their deepest insecurities, the one who once fulfilled all their unspoken needs they refused to admit existed. And when that mirror no longer reflects them, only the light you now carry, they lose all sense of orientation. From that point on, you're no longer someone they can win back. You become an obsession, not out of love, but from sheer powerlessness. But they won't give up so easily. They'll move into a new phase, silent surveillance. It starts with social media. They watch everything you post. They check who's interacting with you, where you are, who you're with, what makes you smile. They don't like, they don't comment, but they see everything. They take screenshots, save the moments that trigger them, or make them jealous. Why? Because they can't stand seeing you live well without them. They need to believe you're still sad, still broken, still missing them. But when you post photos with genuine joy in your eyes, when you share something positive, when you remain silent without even mentioning them, that's when they start to feel left behind. And in the narcissist world, being left behind is equivalent to not existing. They can't tolerate that. So from social media, they escalate. You might not even notice it, but they've started watching you in real life. They'll coincidentally appear near your workplace, at the cafe you frequent, on the street you often walk. They don't greet you. They don't let themselves be seen, but they want to control your space. Because if they can't control your emotions anymore, then at the very least, they want to know where you are, what you're doing, and with whom. This behavior isn't just about control. It's deeply rooted in dangerous obsession. Because when narcissists lose control, they often become extremely unstable. They start constructing a fantasy world that you're trying to provoke them, that your posts are meant to make them jealous, that you still love them, but are pretending to be strong. They don't see the truth. They create a version of reality they can emotionally survive. And in that version, you're still an extension of them. So they watch, they investigate, they analyze your every move like an obsessive psychologist. They tell others you're mysterious, strange, or faking your happiness. But the one truly emotionally unstable is them. Because the more silent and independent you become, the more out of control and confused they feel. And here's the cruel irony. In that silence, you've become the greatest obsession of their life. Not because you're more beautiful, more talented, or more valuable than anyone else, but because you've betrayed the pattern they believed could never be broken. You didn't beg for love, you didn't defend or argue, you didn't flaunt a new relationship or try to prove anything. You simply disappeared quietly from their realm of manipulation, and that drives them insane. Many narcissists will try to return, indirectly. They'll get mutual friends to bring up their name. They'll send vague signals, they'll post cryptic statuses, they might even flaunt a new love, a new life, a better version of themselves, just to see if you'll react. But if you've learned the lesson, you'll know never let them see you react. Because any reaction, whether anger, jealousy, or sadness, is proof that they still have a hold on you. But when you don't respond at all, when you truly break free from their game, you're doing the one thing they fear most. You're taking back control of your life. So, what should you do when the narcissist begins silently tracking you, from social media to real life? Cut off every entry point they might use to sneak back in. First, block them on every platform, not out of hatred, but because you're protecting your mental space. Clinical psychologist Dr. Ramani Durvasula once said, "Every time you check the narcissist's profile, you're feeding their ego and starving your own peace. When you block them, you're not losing, you're shutting down their emotional power supply." Next, if you feel like they're coincidentally showing up where you are, don't ignore that gut instinct. Narcissists are masters at disguising manipulation as chance. But as Dr. Judith Herman, one of the world's leading trauma experts, warned, disregarding boundary violations is the first step toward re-experiencing abuse. Change your routines, vary your routes, or even confide in someone you trust if you feel you're being watched. There's no need for panic, but you must stay proactive and aware. The next rule: don't fall into the reaction trap. When they post vague statuses, flaunt a new partner, or try to stir up drama, remember, your reaction is their fuel. According to research by Dr. Craig Malkin, Harvard University, author of Rethinking Narcissism, narcissists don't need your love. They only need your reaction to feel they still matter to you. So silence, it's the strongest answer. Not passive-aggressive silence, but a conscious boundary, the act of someone who is no longer playing their emotional chess game. Finally, and most importantly, redirect your energy to yourself. Rebuild your healthy support systems, friends, therapy, community. Reconnect with your passions, your goals, your life, the one you paused to survive a toxic relationship. As the great psychologist Carl Rogers once said, "The curious paradox is that when I accept myself just as I am, then I can change." You no longer need to prove anything. You don't need to look healed, just a little every day. Choose you. And that choice, that quiet, unwavering choice, is the most powerful declaration you can make to the narcissist. They are no longer the center of your universe, and they will never have that place again. And it's precisely when you stop reacting, stop wavering, stop engaging, that the narcissist begins to lose direction. Every tactic they once used to manipulate you, the silence, the accidental appearances, the nostalgic messages, the cryptic status updates, falls flat. They expected you to come back. They believed you were only pretending, that eventually you'd send a signal to let them know you hadn't moved on. But when that never happens, a terrifying truth begins to emerge for them. You didn't just leave the relationship, you left their control. And this is what breaks them the most. You're no longer afraid of them. Fear, whether conscious or subconscious, has always been the invisible leash a narcissist uses to control your emotions. They made you fear losing them, fear abandonment, fear not being enough. And as long as fear existed, you remained vulnerable, still within their grip. But once you begin to recognize that fear was never yours, it was a tool planted inside you. And once you choose to confront it rather than run from it, you're reclaiming your inner freedom. Narcissists don't control through strength. They control by inflating the insecurities you never dared to face. And when you face them and begin to heal, you strip away everything they could once use against you. True freedom is what haunts them, not because you left, but you left without needing their permission. You didn't lash out. You didn't try to outshine them. You didn't try to prove a point. You simply disappeared with peace and complete authority over your own life. And that shakes them to the core. Remember, narcissists don't need your love. They only need to know they still get a reaction, be it love, hate, or heartbreak. But when you don't react, when you are no longer afraid, you don't just walk away from them. You force them to face the hollow void within themselves that they've spent a lifetime avoiding. So how do you hold on to this freedom in a world full of emotional traps? Continue enforcing boundaries, and don't compromise. Narcissists often come back, sometimes after months, even years. A casual message, a late apology, a subtle suggestion to reconnect. Don't be fooled. You're not lacking someone to love, you just once lacked faith in your own worth. Never negotiate with disrespect. If someone once dismissed you, manipulated you, hurt you, and comes back pretending nothing happened, they don't deserve another chance. As Dr. Harriet Lerner famously wrote, a real apology is not the beginning of change. Behavior is. Maintain your emotional armor. Therapy, journaling, meditation, movement, a safe, uplifting community. These are not luxuries. They are spiritual armor that protect you from being dragged back into darkness. Always remind yourself, you left not because you're cold, but because you've grown. You're no longer driven to rescue someone who has no desire to change. You no longer use love as a tool to fix a person who only weaponized it against you. You choose you. You choose awareness. You choose a life no longer led by fear. And do you know what? That's what makes you untouchable to the narcissist. And there's one thing the narcissist will never admit, yet it haunts them relentlessly. It's not that you left. It's not that you went silent. It's not even that you're doing well. What truly torments them is the possibility that you will meet someone better than them and be loved in a way they were never capable of loving you. It's not love that makes them jealous. It's the fear of being replaced. Because for the narcissist, what they fear most isn't losing you. It's losing the role they used to play in your life, the role of the one you sacrificed for, forgave endlessly, and tried to fix at your own expense. They didn't love you as a person. They loved the function you served in their distorted world. And when that function disappeared, when you slipped out of their grip, they weren't devastated by your absence. They were shattered by the void left in their control. So when you begin to glow again, when you start living more aligned with your true self, they panic. Why? Because deep inside they know you might fall in love again, and this time you won't be destroyed. You'll be cherished. That's a scenario they can't handle. Narcissists can't imagine you being happy without them. In their warped reality, you will always belong to them. Even if you've blocked them, cut contact, and vanished without a trace. They tell themselves you'll fail in future relationships. They hope you'll miss them, compare everyone to them, and realize no one understands you like they did. But when the opposite happens, when you stop comparing, stop regretting, and dare to love again in a healthier, freer, more conscious way, that's when their ego starts to crumble. If they see you with someone new, they'll lash out. They'll mock the new person, he's a joke. They'll smear your name, she's just using him. They'll study your photos, your smile, your captions, dissecting everything, pretending not to care while internally unraveling. But what truly shatters them is this. You're smiling for real. You're not performing. You're not posting out of spite. You're simply living without their permission, without their validation, without their existence. And they know you've slipped out of reach. You're no longer the victim. You're no longer the emotionally starved partner waiting to be noticed. You've become the reborn survivor, and now you're being loved, not because you're empty, but because you're whole. They cannot cope with the idea that you've succeeded in love without them, because it dismantles their entire narrative, that you were too sensitive, too emotional, too much, too broken. But the truth is, you were never too much. You were simply too good for someone who only knew how to feed off your light. They can't stand that someone else now sees your sensitivity as strength, your emotions as depth, and your presence as a gift, not a burden. And most of all, they can't handle that you're finally loved in a way that asks nothing of your dignity. In their minds, you were supposed to stay damaged. You were supposed to struggle. You were supposed to break without them. But you didn't. You healed. You grew. You rose. And you walked away without burning bridges because you didn't need to. You didn't need revenge. You didn't need noise. You just needed peace. And now you have it. They will obsess in silence. They'll stalk your profiles. They'll create fake narratives to make themselves feel better. They'll convince others that you're faking, that your joy is temporary. But deep down, they know you're no longer performing. You're truly free. You don't need to prove anything anymore. Your silence proves it all. You don't need to talk about them. Your peace speaks volumes. And that peace, the quiet glow of someone who has come back to themselves, is the narcissist's worst nightmare. Because in the end, it's not just that you moved on. It's not just that you survived. It's that you're being loved by someone they could never become and that they will never recover from. When you're finally loved the right way, truly the right way, you no longer ask yourself every day, am I enough yet? Because healthy love never demands that you strive to be enough. It doesn't turn you into someone who must earn worthiness. Healthy love accepts you even when you're imperfect, holds your hand through the healing, and never uses pain as a way to keep you close. And it's in that moment that you realize everything you once endured, the silent treatment, the manipulation behind sweet words, the constant emotional guessing games, that was never love. It was a power play disguised as passion. But now, you don't play anymore. With someone who loves you properly, you're allowed to simply be. You're not afraid of talking too much or being too emotional. You're not tiptoeing around moods, hoping today they won't go cold. You're not bracing yourself for withdrawal or punishment. You breathe, you live, you love, without losing yourself. And as you enter a relationship with someone who is emotionally mature, you begin to understand something life-changing. Love isn't supposed to exhaust you. It's meant to ground you. Love isn't supposed to make you question your worth. It's meant to help you cherish it. And most importantly, real love never requires you to shrink so someone else can feel bigger. That's when you become the version of yourself the narcissist fears most. Someone who didn't just survive the pain, they've grown deeper, wiser, stronger, and are now untouchable to manipulation. And when the narcissist looks at you in that state, they don't see a former supply. They see someone who has outgrown the space they once tried to control. They see a light they can no longer dim. They see a person being loved properly and therefore a person with no cracks for them to slip back through. And then they begin to fade. Not all at once, not with a dramatic exit, but gradually, like an illusion dissolving in the light of truth. You don't need to chase them. You don't need revenge. You don't even need closure. Your very presence now, strong, calm, whole, is the answer. And if you've made it this far, if you've felt and lived every layer of this journey, then allow me to say this clearly and without hesitation. You didn't just walk away from a person. You walked away from an entire system of pain that once disguised itself as love. You crossed the fog of emotional manipulation. You walked through the wreckage of a love built on fear, self-doubt, and conditional worth. And you made it here, to this place where you no longer have to shrink, no longer have to explain, no longer have to be good enough to be seen as worthy. You've learned something that many people spend their whole lives chasing. Real love doesn't make you question yourself. Real love doesn't demand your dignity in exchange for belonging. Real love is not pain dressed up in promises. If there is pain, it is the kind that heals, not the kind that breaks. And now you walk, not as a victim, not as a fighter, but as yourself, fully, freely. And that, just as you are, is enough. Enough to be loved, enough to be respected, enough to live a life of peace, of clarity, of emotional freedom on your terms. As for the narcissist, they may still be watching. They may still be gossiping. They may still be plotting a return. They may still be playing every game they know because that's all they have. They don't know how to love any other way. They don't know how to live outside the role of control. And that's not your fault, but it's also no longer your burden. You have stepped off the stage they thought you couldn't live without. You no longer need to perform. You no longer need an audience. All you need now is the light you found within yourself. The light you uncovered through every wound, every quiet healing, every brave decision not to go back, even when your heart still ached. And if you're at the beginning of this journey, hear this. There is no easy path when you first step away from a narcissist. The loneliness will claw at you. The emptiness will whisper doubts. The good memories will return in waves, sweetened by distance, tempting you back into the cycle. But walk anyway, even slowly, even trembling. Just don't look back. Because with every step you take away from them, you take one step closer to yourself. And once you're far enough, you'll realize real love never demands you abandon who you are. If someone ever made you feel like you were too sensitive, too emotional, too difficult to love, let me say this again so it sinks deep. You were never too much. You were never weak. You were never wrong for loving deeply. You simply loved the wrong person. And now you're learning how to love right. The right person, the right way. But first and foremost, you're learning how to love yourself. And that changes everything.